All right. Well, welcome once again to the second session of the Anatomy of Conflict webinar. And Michael Cheuk, a coach and consultant connected with CBF of Virginia, and I'm just so excited to be able to be with you today. So, in terms of welcome and introductions, if we can just very briefly just state our names and perhaps like where we are hailing from, and then we will go on to our next session. Terry, would you like to just?
Sure. Terry Maples. I am, at least for 2 more weeks, the coordinator of CBF Virginia, and I am coming to you from Midlothian, Virginia.
Thank you. Dan.
I pastor Church and Baptist Church in Chesapeake, Virginia, nearly 30 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean.
Awesome. Kenny?
Kenny Davis. I'm pastor at Bobby's Road Baptist Church, Troy, Virginia, so between Charlottesville and Richmond.
Thanks, Kenny. And your wife, Laura, I'm just going to speak for her because she is actually driving on her way to class, I believe, right, at Campbell. And so she has her camera and microphone off, but she is attending. And Tiffany.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tiffany Slaughter. I'm pastor at Cambridge Baptist Church in Cambridge, Virginia, and been here just over a year.
Wonderful. So good to see you.
You too.
All right. So let me just share with you the objectives that I like for us to, the objectives for today, right? So I'd like for us as participants that we will explore the roles of human needs, feelings, and thoughts and stories that we tell and play in our interpersonal conflict, to attain a deeper understanding of the 5 conflict styles and explore what needs are met by each style, and learn how many conflicts occur on the level of strategies, conflicting strategies, and not necessarily on the level of unmet needs. And finally, to distinguish between requests and demands in exploring strategies to meet human needs. And I have a handout, and to those that I knew were attending, I sent them an email. And Tiffany, if you don't have that handout, I can also put it in the chat if you want, or you can even just scan the QR code to find it. Oops, sorry. All right. And then once again, group agreement, 1 person speak at a time, give person speaking your full attention, phones off or on mute, or if you're actually using your phone while driving, whatever, listen to understand and learn, suspend judgment, speak your truth, and be willing to experience discomfort. And to the extent that if you are in agreement with these actions, could you just raise your hand and we will move forward? Great. All right. Well, here we go. This is literally posted today in the Washington Post. It is Carolyn Hacks. Tiffany, do you have a question? Your hand is up.
You told us to raise our hands, so that was the best I could do at the moment.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. No, it's all good. Sorry. And Kevin Ritter is coming too. Well, let's wait until Kevin shows up.
Recording in progress.
Hey, Kevin, welcome. Glad that you can make it. We just did a very brief introduction. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Can you see me all right? My video isn't showing up.
Yeah, your camera isn't showing up.
There you go. How about now?
Yes, perfect.
All right. My name is Kevin Ritter. I'm the pastor at Centerville Baptist Church, and I've been here for 13 years.
Welcome. So we just started, right? And so you haven't really missed anything. We did the introduction. This is our first slide here. This is posted in the Washington Post today. Carolyn Hacks, the advised columnist, and so there is a link to it. I want to make sure that I credit her. And the poster says, "Dear Carolyn, my sister just had a baby and asked me for hand-me-downs. from my 2-year-old. I told her I was holding on for them for our second child, and she said that, oh, she would give them back after she's done with them. But I know her. She's not careful with her own things, much less with anyone else's. We just bought a house. We need to be really frugal and responsible, and saving our baby stuff is one way we are saving money. She is very persistent and thinks she is entitled to use my baby's used baby stuff, and will throw a tantrum if I don't cave. How do I handle her? This is a lifelong pattern between us that I really need to break. So this is a possible, right, conflictual situation, real life. And this is what we will be addressing in terms of interpersonal conflict between two individuals, and how we might be able to address it. Once again, I will define a definition of conflict. Conflict exists when a person has a need and that need is not being met. There are many other definitions of conflict, but just for the sake of this presentation and seminar and webinar, I'm going to kind of use this as kind of a guiding path as we talk about conflict. And so there are two different things that I want to also, once again, remind you, and that's coming from our handout, is the notion of universal human needs that we all have, like physical well-being and vitality, interdependence, self-awareness. And you can see all the various kind of words and descriptions that might come under those categories. And then also human feelings. Feelings of calm and gladness and engaged, being refreshed, fearful, confused, so on and so forth. So at this point, I want to maybe get back to that Carolyn Hack's, let's see here, right here, yep. So any thoughts about this situation? You know, in terms of either conflict, in terms of just whatever you'd like to kind of bring into our conversation right now.
Michael, not to jump too far ahead to the inventory, but to jump to the inventory.
Yes.
You know, the thing there was I think it was goals and relationships.
Yes.
And with the last sentence in which you mentioned that this was a last sentence before last, that this was an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
In that relationship, that's the part where, for me, when it's ongoing and it's nagging like that, I know personally I would go right towards the goal and say, you know, enough with a relationship. I'm not going to get.
Yeah.
The history's there, and I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah,
which isn't a right answer.
No, it's
just where I would go.
Exactly. And here, you know, we're not trying to get the right answer. We're not trying to guess what Carolyn, you know, responds or whatever. This is just a way for us to kind of jump right in, right? And I really appreciate the fact that you brought in the Crable conflict style inventory, you know, because that's exactly what I hope we would do, is to engage, you know, kind of an example, but also reflect on, like, how might I, you know, respond in this situation.
And I threw in it not being necessarily right answer part, just to say, I know that there's a cost that would come with going that route.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good.
She triangled in the advice columnist, the distraught sister. Rather than moving directly towards her sister, she triangled in the advice columnist to ease her angst with her sister. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yes. That's right. Triangulation takes place when there is anxiety, and, you know, and that's how Carolyn Hacks brings home the bacon.
And to go one step deeper, Michael, it seems to me that it would be fun to explore what the patterns of relating within the nuclear family were that gave birth to this conflictual situation.
That's exactly right too. Yeah. Yeah. And so many times, like when we think about conflict, we look on the surface and exactly like what happened in this situation. But we do know that there are patterns of functioning, and it is based on our experiences growing up, our relationship to the major influential and powerful people in our lives, mostly our parents. And so those are all kind of underneath that. And it also affects the kinds of stories that we tell ourselves, right? And that could lead to conflictual situations. Yep. Very good. Once again, no right answers or whatever. I really appreciate the conversation. Anything else before we kind of dive into the conflict in style inventory? All right. If not, so let me see here. Yep, feelings. Yep. Okay. So I think most of you had a chance to take the Craybill conflict style inventory. Tiffany, I wonder if you had a chance to do that. If not, we can get you a link so that you can take it at a later date, right? So just let me know in the chat or whatever.
That'll be good.
Great. But once again, I'm not an expert. I'm not certified to do the assessment and so forth. I have taken the assessment, and I think Chris Gamble would be a person that I would recommend if you would like to go more in depth regarding your particular assessment and report. But it is a validated inventory, and it shows the user your preferred style of conflict management. And it also gives suggestions for kind of optimizing your personal style. Okay. And so I'm going to click on this video. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I am already sharing my screen. Am I? Okay, let me see. Just 1 second. Am I sharing my screen? No. Okay. Here we go. All right. Can you share? Can you see the screen? Can somebody say yes or no, because it's kind of okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, all right. And I guess I did not share my screen heretofore, so I apologize for that. So here is an introduction to the conflict styles. You might have seen it in the video, but I'll just share it with you right now. It's only a couple of minutes.
Let's review the principles underlying the Style Matters conflict.
Can you hear?
Inventory.
You can increase, that'd be great.
Need more volume, Michael.
Conflict.
Yep, trying.
One is the assertiveness factor. That is, how hard do we push for the things we want, our agenda? We can have a high focus on our own agenda or a low focus. A second factor is the relationship. How much attention do we give to it? We can have a high focus on the relationship, in which case we'll be very concerned about pleasing the other person, or we can have a low focus. We can put these two factors together on one screen like this. Focus on the relationship is on the horizontal axis, low or high. Focus on my own agenda is on the vertical axis, low or high. Our response in conflict depends on what we focus on. There are 5 different possibilities, or we could say 5 styles of responding to conflict. Each is the result of what we focus on. Each is great at some things and not so good at others. Let's look at these one at a time. Directing involves a high focus on my own agenda and a low focus on the relationship. I win, you lose. Strategies might be I assert, control, compete, insist, demand, defeat. We're doing it my way. Just get the job done, or let me win the argument and worry about the relationship later. Harmonizing involves a high focus on the relationship and a low focus on my agenda. I lose, you win. I agree, go along, give in, affirm. Attitudes, sure, I'm flexible. Whatever you say, whatever you're happy with is fine with me. Avoiding involves low focus on my own agenda and a low focus on the relationship. I lose, you lose. Because you know what? We aren't even going to talk about it. Responses would be withdrawal, remain silent, walk away, postpone discussion, delay. Thoughts in my head might be, let me out of here. I don't want to talk about it. Or conflict? What conflict? Cooperating involves a high commitment to my own agenda and a high focus on the relationship. I win, you also win. How do we do that? We talk, we dialogue, we agree to talk it through, we assert ourselves and support the other. It's a both-and strategy. Compromising involves a medium focus on my own agenda and a medium focus on the relationship. We both win some, not everything that we want. We both lose some, but not everything. We bargain, we strike a deal, we find a little something for everyone. The idea is if we each back off and accept half of what we want, we can get an agreement and move on. Compromising is similar to cooperating in that both are engaging in trying to resolve the conflict, but compromising is not as confident in the possibility of talking things through as cooperating is. Compromising seeks a deal, some give and take, and then we resolve it and get on with things. 5 styles of responding to conflict, each the result of what we focus on, each great at some things and not so good at others. When the only tool you have is a hammer, everything you see is a nail. We don't want to be dependent on 1 or 2 styles and use them in all situations. Conflict is easier when you're good at all 5 styles. Each style is a valuable tool, essential for particular situations all of us face. We handle conflict better when we're skilled in all 5 styles. Then we can choose the response most likely to bring a good outcome. Learn the strengths and limitations of each style. Grow by experimenting with greater use of styles you use least. When the heat goes up, you don't have to react in the same old way. You can choose your response in conflict.
Great. All right.
Let's review the principles underlying the Style Matters conflict style inventory.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. Okay. Any thoughts about the video? And then we can talk about the various styles. Sounds like everybody has a pretty good handle on it. And so I'm going to share my screen again. So there are 5 styles, right? Directing, harmonizing, avoiding, cooperating, and compromising. And there's, I win, you lose. And then the strategies. This is in your handout, and it is a summary of that presentation. So at this point, seems like you don't have any questions. Wonder if I'm going to share my scores, but I wonder if folks want to also share your scores. You can put it in the chat, or we can just kind of have a brief conversation about it and just process this a little bit more concretely, so to speak.
I'll share mine. I should have. You want me to chat it or talk it?
Oh, yeah, you can just talk it. I think that's fine.
I'll start with directing. How do you want me to give? How do you want me to give you my score? Just go around the.
Yeah,
around the circle.
Just go around the circle. I'm gonna kind of leave this. You can ignore my numbers, right? But
Okay.
people can see it, and then they can. Yeah.
Directing, I had calm score of 12, storm score of 9.
Mm-hmm.
Cooperating, I had a calm score of 13, storm score of 7.
Mm.
Avoiding, I had calm score of 7, storm score of 7.
Mm-hmm.
And harmonizing, a calm score of 5, a storm score of 5. Compromising, calm score 10, storm score 9.
Mm. Mm. So I noticed that.
Why do I interpret your How do I interpret that?
Oh no, it's just like, oh, that's very interesting, right? Do you want to say any more about kind of your takeaway from the scores?
It's a valid inventory. I've never taken it in this detail, so thank you for that opportunity. Some of the words hooked me. Happy is not a word I understand what happy means, but sometimes happy is warm and fuzzy. Like someone said a couple weeks ago, well, I'm not happy right now with church. Well, it's not the church's job to make you happy. I mean, I didn't say that back, but happy is kind of a word that I don't know the word they could have used. I would have preferred a word beside happy in the score. That's just a mental block of me.
Yeah, sure.
So I may have probably, it's pretty accurate of me. I think the 7, as I reflect on it, it's a pretty good view of me. I looked at it more from a leadership perspective and then a conflict management, because sometimes as a leader, we have to be directive, not blowing people off, but you got to be more directive. So that's why avoiding and harmonizing were pretty low on me, because I'm not going to avoid and I'm not going to try to harmonize, because that's just my take on it.
Yeah.
But thank you for the chance to do this. I will put this under my pillow and sleep with it and learn by osmosis.
Yes, thank you for sharing. One of the things that, as I was reading my report, is that I think it noticed that there was quite a big jump in my compromising score from calm of 7 to storm of 12, right? And that and so depending on how I'm feeling, people may see me differently and may be surprised by my actions or decisions and so forth. And so as we all look at our scores, that also might be something to kind of at least look at, right? And
I have a question about the inventory itself. When I took the inventory, I could choose 2 different ways to complete the inventory.
Mm-hmm.
One was like general, one was specific.
Mm-hmm.
I did the general.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to do the specific, can I assume I would have the same breakdown, or would the inventory be altered somewhat?
It's hard to know, and I'm just gonna just express my ignorance about that.
Okay.
Because I haven't taken it 2 times with those 2 different, either specific and a general scenario in mind. And it could also depend on the actual scenario that you have in mind. Because for me, if I were to think of a scenario where, I am in my family of origin and I am much more easily hooked, I think my scores might look a little bit differently than if my specific scenario might be with a group of friends from CBF Virginia, right? And so I think, so that's just my initial thinking about that really good question. Anybody would like to also share? And we don't have time to, ask everybody to share, but only if you do. And I can
I won't go into all the scoring, but just a couple of observations. And one on the question just asked. I think what the relationship is will be as influential on the specific as what the event is, because there are some relationships that I might tend to cooperate or aim for cooperating more, and some I might harmonize and just say whatever, have it your way. So it depends on the relationship. What I was going to mention though, as an observation, looking, especially having heard the video, some of the phrasing, the I win, you lose,
Mhm.
that is very different when it's a low degree of, at least to me, a low degree of conflict. If it can be if you can, directing looks, I think, when you feel like you've got wiggle room anyway,
Yes.
and you've got some relational capital, and it can be, maybe playful is too easy of a word, but it's easier for me to be directing when I think that there's going to be some mutual respect, which maybe sounds opposite of directing, I realize, but you can advocate and state your case pretty clearly. If there's if it's high intent, then I win, you lose sounds like a lot different. There's a meanness to me when there's a lot of heat and you go the I win, you lose route. So just that phrase itself sounds different in each quadrant to me, even though it belongs in one of us.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't thought of it in those ways, but I was actually coaching a pastor about a month ago, and she came to realize that during COVID, like she's always a person that wants to be a collaborating kind of pastor, but in the high anxiety, constantly changing context of COVID, she came to realize that she probably could have been a more effective leader if she leaned into being a more confident and more directing kind of a leader. And people were actually looking for her to say, with about all these various options, I think we need to do this right here, instead of just sitting back and say, oh, so what do you all think about this? Anyway, that what you just said, Kenny, kind of reminded me of that conversation. I hope it might have a little bit of relevance and consonance there. But yeah. So I think for me, the main takeaway is that we have options in terms of how we respond to conflict. If we have a greater awareness of the style that we most likely use, both in terms of when things are calm and when things are more heated up in a storm situation, that greater self-awareness hopefully might then give us an awareness that we have other strategies to take for the sake of the congregation, for the sake of leadership, and then choose intentionally instead of more reactively. That's kind of my basic takeaway, and I think it can be a helpful tool to do that, right? So I'm going to share my screen again, and this time I'm actually going to. So this is the actual post. I forgot to share my screen, but I love the illustration of the Caroline Pack's column. So as we think about that original poster, right? where her sister wants her family's hand-me-downs. Like how might each conflict style, how might each style might look like, right, in this situation, if the original poster was more directing or avoiding or cooperating or harmonizing or compromising. And I think that's a very interesting question, because as I read her original post, I think she was hoping to maybe harmonize or maybe compromise, but there are other options that she could take too.
If she were directing or cooperating, she wouldn't have asked the advice from the columnist.
Right. She
would have known what she wanted to do and needed to do. She wouldn't ask somebody else for advice if she were more directing or cooperating.
Yes, and you would just forego the triangulation and just go straight to the relationship, right, to address it. Yes. Yes, thank you. So yeah, and I think one of the things that I want to suggest that, in each style, there could be certain needs that may be addressed in that particular situation, in that particular time. Once again, not saying that it could be right or wrong, but it just is. So, like if I were to go for a more directing kind of style, right, to assert control and so forth, maybe the needs that I have, and if you look at the handout, personal autonomy, effectiveness, ease for myself. So thank you, Kevin. Keeping you in our prayers. Yep. Harmonizing, because it is more focused upon the relationship, at least at this point, the needs right now could be a sense of community, a sense of peace, so to speak, to keep that relationship of belonging and also maybe inclusion. If one were to avoid, the immediate need right now could be just maybe personal sense of emotional safety and comfort. I just need to get out of this situation right now at this point, right? So cooperating could be interdependence, significance, right? Community, authenticity. We bring our whole selves, but it's not just me. We are interdependent with one another. And compromising, it could be the same kinds of needs, interdependence and community, but maybe at a slightly lower level. And that it could be, we can live with this. It may not be what we originally would have wanted for ourselves and our community, but at this point right now, perhaps this is the best that we can do. So I want to, it's kind of a different, I don't know if it's a deeper level, but also another thing to just think about in terms of how our various conflict styles might have a connection to what I may need right now, and to reflect upon what the organization or the community may need to. Okay. At this point, any questions, thoughts, comments, pushback?
Just to go back to your question about the columnist article, I think you're right. It sounded like from her writing that she was leaning towards the harmonizing.
Mm-hmm.
If without other advice given, that's probably where she would land. Yep. I think it would be, though, I give a little pushback on the idea of the directing, in that she might want to go the directing route, but maybe out of humility, of fearing that that's wrong, might be why she would write Carolyn Hacks. So out of a sense of I want to go the directing route, but I feel some guilt there. So it's not, I don't know. It just seems like you could desire to be in a different quadrant, but not see the roadblocks to that, and not really want to navigate and try to say, should I do something different in this moment than what I might generally do?
Yeah, yeah. And especially if it's something that is not your kind of dominant style, is like any other thing, right? If I try out a new sport or a new skill, it's just really hard to kind of get enough practice in order to be competent at it. And so it could be something like this too, right? So to ask somebody else to in terms of maybe not just advice, but like, how do I do this? Might this even be a viable way? So
Michael, seeing your chart, this one, it's just kind of jumping all over me. I wonder if anybody's done any corollaries between this and Enneagram numbers.
Oh yeah.
The natural tendencies for whether your style would fall in a certain place, because I can think of specific numbers that would at least begin in a particular place. Obviously, we all can evolve, and that's what the tool is about, making us aware, which is what Enneagram is about too.
Exactly.
You don't have to stay stuck in pattern. But I wonder if there was a corollary. I'll do some research on that.
Yeah, please do, because I certainly I am aware of the Enneagram, and I have read some books, but definitely don't have any competence in it. But I suspect that there could be some correlation, and also correlation. There's a kind of this healthy and less healthy level too, and seeing how what that might look like even within a certain Enneagram number, and also depending on the wings too, right? So I mean, there are a lot of different ways to kind of take a look at that. But yeah, to the extent that this isn't written in stone, this is a tool to help in an awareness. I think it could be helpful. Great. All right. So let's explore strategies in making requests to meet mutual needs. Okay, so here is I'm still sharing my screen. You should see a YouTube video coming up. Okay.
In previous presentations, we introduced the idea that your feelings, bodily sensations of happiness, sadness, anger, fear, so forth, are signals communicating to you whether your needs are being met or not. Therefore, when one is experiencing negative feelings, it is important to identify what needs are not being met. It is important to realize that universal human needs include food, connection, and belonging, can be met by a variety of strategies. For example, our need for food can be met by eating Cheetos, lobsters, or insects. While different cultures, ages, and societies may view one of these strategies for food to be more preferable, healthier, or disgusting than others. Our need for connection can be met by a variety of strategies, including our spouse, our friends, or someone on social media. Our need for community can be met by strategies as different as family, church, service organizations, or even a Facebook group. Conflicts often occur when people are focused on the level of strategies and not listening and connecting with one another on the level of needs. Conflicts between two or more people often occur when the conflicting individuals wrestle with competing strategies which divide, instead of recognizing shared human needs which unite. Conflicts occur when we are attached to one strategy and only that strategy to meet our needs. If we can connect with each other at the level of human needs, we have a better chance of resolving conflicts by mutually exploring innovative strategies that could meet mutual needs. This exploration of strategies comes in the form of making requests. In our attempts to communicate to another person about unmet needs, for example, our need for connection, we often unintentionally make demands instead of requests of others. It's a demand if the requester criticizes or judges the person who refuses to comply. A request can be refused with no judgment or criticism. It is also important to realize that no one individual can meet all of our legitimate human needs all the time. Take time now to discuss this video presentation in your small group.
Okay. Anybody want to just kind of talk about this a little bit? Oh. What I wanted to do was to distinguish that many times, when we are in conflictual situations, like the one with Carolyn Hacks, right? The conflictual situation occurs at the level of strategy. So in that sense, in that instance, the strategy was, you, sister, need to give all your clothes and to me, right? We all have a need for shelter and clothing for our children. How we meet that need is what those two sisters are in conflict about. So, any thoughts?
It makes me wonder, Michael, if the demanding sister does not have a good community or network that she could lean into for clothing and hand-me-downs, which is what you typically would see happen in good networks.
Yes, yes. And maybe at that point is really an assumption, perhaps a demand that one sister is meeting, a lot of different needs. And clothing just being one of them for for her baby. Yep. Anything else? So just a little teaser. In the next seminar next week, we're going to talk about groups and systems, and we will kind of talk through a hypothetical case of COVID masking and how a conflict in that situation might play out using all 5 of the conflict styles and thinking about masking as a strategy to meet needs and what needs are met or unmet, right? So what do you think? If we can connect with each other on the level of human needs, we have a better chance of resolving conflicts by mutually exploring innovative strategies that could meet mutual needs. I wonder what innovative strategies possibly, right, can be discovered or explored, regarding the Carolyn Hack situation. If it isn't just this one strategy of one sister lending all of her baby clothes to another sister, what other strategies might be explored to meet the need for clothing for that mother at that time? But that takes conversation. Yeah. Anyway, any thoughts?
I think whenever there's a conflict too, there's an the language used sometimes does not the person that's on the other end does not hear it the way that the person who's saying it is meaning it. And I think that can cause a lot of conflict. And just trying to figure out that language, being able to learn each other and how to be able to share in such a way that you're both being heard is an important aspect of it, even before you get to all of the 5 different types of how you handle conflict.
That's a very good point, that the way we communicate, if I'm hearing you correctly, Laura, is so important. And if we're able to communicate in ways that the way that we communicate may either exacerbate or can kind of tamp down the conflictual potential of a situation. Yeah. Anyone else?
How would you make a distinction between human needs and human wants?
That is a very, very good question, because I think there can be a lot of confusion among us right now about that. And while when we look at the needs, right? And I might just say this is, I'm just kind of like thinking off the top of my head, is we can probably all agree when we look at the human needs chart that these are the things that we as human beings require in order to live, to survive, and hopefully to thrive. But we don't live in an island all to ourselves, and that there is we are in relationship with other people, and actually in an ecosystem with other creatures that God has created. And so if it is only to meet my own need at the expense of other people and their needs, that's, I might not call it a want, but that may be a boundary that definitely needs to be clarified and also have some common agreement, instead of one person by fiat proclaiming all of this is part of the realm of my need, to the exclusion of other people and their needs and their flourishing. So that's a great question.
Well, thank you. I think your use of the phrase "at the exclusion of the needs of other people" is a good balance point. And COVID made this more of an issue for me pastorally, because with an older congregation, folks who are widowed, living alone, the isolation factor.
Yeah.
What do folks need and what do folks want, and how do we respond as a community to those? Knowing we can't respond the way we might pre-COVID. We can't go to your house or come by and see you. So that that whole dynamic kind of made the needs and wants kind of thing more in the front of my thought process. And it's still a factor in so many ways, even though we're at a different place in terms of the pandemic. It's still out there, that mental construct of needs and wants. So that's why. But thank you for hearing the question and clarifying at the exclusion of.
Yeah.
And that will be really good with a case study next week about the COVID.
Right. I might also suggest that, even before we get to excluding, that there could be a priority of needs. And so that at a certain situation, right, our need of whatever you might want to say, like, let's say belonging and connection, right? At least we feel that at that point might even be higher than our own health. And so we prioritize belonging and connection and community. And even though health is so important, even to our survival, we might at this point say, to heck with it, I'm going to risk my own health in order to meet these other needs that seem more urgent, and I'm prioritizing that right now. I know that I kind of prioritize that, and my wife might disagree in terms of my prioritization of what those needs are, but it is then a really good situation and opportunity to then have conversations to clarify for myself. Even many times is not even clarified within myself. I just kind of go and go on kind of reactively. So I think the difference between requests and demands, right? I think a request can definitely be refused with no negative consequences, while demand, there really is a negative consequence if you do not meet the demands of another person. And so that gets to conversation that Laura talked about. So Laura, thank you for your question, because you anticipated this example of how we might be able to communicate in ways that the way we communicate may also stimulate how another person may hear what we want to say. Oh, wait a second. Sorry. So I'm going to share. I am sharing my screen, right? Can you? Okay.
So let's
Yes.
consider this example.
And can you hear?
After a long day at home taking care of twin toddlers,
Yes.
spouse 1 greets spouse 2 with a strategy. Let's go out for dinner. However, spouse 2, after a long day at work, responds with another strategy. I just want to stay home and binge on Netflix. Spouse 1 hears that strategy and interprets it as an personal rejection, and instead of connecting to feelings like sadness or frustration and their need for connection and rest, spouse 1 may then react by blaming. You never want to do anything with me. Or shaming. Oh, you are so selfish. Spouse 2, in desperate need for understanding for rest after an exhausting workday, hears that as an attack instead of a tragic expression of an unmet need. And then spouse 2 reacts by withdrawing into self-blame. Yes, I'm an awful selfish person. Or by attacking, well, you're certainly no saint. Or by freezing, by not responding at all. Tragically, neither spouse is taking responsibility for their own feelings and needs. Both expect the other to fulfill their unmet needs without considering the needs of the other. Pause the video and share situations that you have observed in your family, in your workplace or church that remind you of this way of communicating.
I'm sure none of us have been in situations like that ever, right? Like totally. Like what is Mike even talking about here? Well, I have to say that's certainly not true for me. I mean, it just actually happened yesterday with my wife. So it is very, very hard, I think, to first of all connect to what I'm feeling. Like my heart was pumping at that moment, right? And my whole body was tense, and I just want to defend myself instead of hearing what my wife was actually saying, which had nothing to do with me, but out of her exhausted frustration that a program on the computer froze up and she lost 30 minutes of work. And I kind of took it personally. Yeah. So, any thoughts?
I think a lot of times, this kind of is like a simple answer, but there's so many more dynamics that go into that it gets so more complicated, that if you get to the point where you could, for lack of a better word, dumb it down to that, um, you're better at having a level playing field to be able to kind of decipher and move forward. But especially when there's so many things in the equation, just to get it down to what this person is experiencing and what this person is experiencing on top of whatever the conflict is. It's always very challenging.
Yeah, it really is, especially when it's also like you have to respond at the moment, right? And I am really slow and I just need to like breathe, and it's like I'm out or whatever. And sometimes situations does not allow us to do that. So it's an ongoing work. But yeah, I definitely hear you, Tiffany. Yep. Anyone else? Like in my situation with my wife, whatever, I think it would have been so much more helpful if I just told her, oh my goodness, I can't imagine just how frustrated you are at this point. And you said you wanted to throw my computer out the window. If it happened to me, I would want to do that too. Instead of saying, it's not the computer, it's the software, blah, 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 right? Like the last thing she needed was to be correcting like exactly what might be going on, but just to connect and to have some compassion and empathy, like, oh, this is what you're experiencing right now. That's what you're feeling. I can't help you really, but I'm really sorry about that. And I could even as I'm talking right now, I could feel my body just like easing and calming. And that instead of a situation where I really felt a divide between my wife and me, that could actually been a situation where it could have been a situation of connection and understanding, while at the same time, there was nothing I could have done to help her in that situation when she had to close the program and lose 30 minutes of hard work.
It's also, in this situation, it's a little easier in a sense that typically you know your spouse, or have you gotten to know them over time, so you know their personalities and that type of thing. But if you deal with this like one-on-one or between two people in a congregation, you don't necessarily know what their situations are to begin with, much less the personalities that are coming in. So there's just so many variables that really, you say the wrong thing, you have no clue you said the wrong thing because you have no idea what the hot spot is.
Yep. You just stepped into a minefield, right? And had no idea what the landscape was even about. Yep. So Terry, I was just thinking about your Enneagram. I'm not a 2, but I understand a 2 is like a helper, right? And so forth. And I think so many times I jump into this helping mode and like, what can I do? What can I do? And maybe sometimes it could be even more helpful to kind of like not jump in and be helpful. So in a conflictual situation, just because your needs are not being met doesn't necessarily mean that another person is responsible for meeting your needs, right? And conversely, just because the other person's needs are not being met doesn't necessarily mean that you are responsible for meeting that person's need. As a chronic overfunctioner, I'm constantly hooked as a pastor to try to feel responsible to meet whatever that person's need might be, without thinking about the greater systemic implications of other groups, of other people. And so then it's like a whack-a-mole where I'm running around trying to, extinguish little fires without really having a understanding of what's going on in the church as a system, as a whole. And I'm just kind of reactively chasing one thing after another. And so it is an invitation for me to kind of pause and say, oh, what unmet needs does, like in this situation, what unmet needs does the sister have in this situation where she wants her sister's family's hand-me-downs? And how is she communicating her unmet needs with her sister? I found that in church ministry, members have a way of tragically communicating their unmet needs to me that for me in that moment feels like it's an attack, it's a demand, it's all those things that make me want to run and hide. But if I'm in a better kind of state of mind and state of spirit, I am better able to just pause long enough to say, maybe this really isn't about me, and this could be something else that I know nothing about at this point. But there is some deep unmet needs that are being communicated in a very tragic way that is not really going to help her to meet the actual need that she is crying out for. That was a lot of words. I don't know if that actually makes sense or not.
Well, Michael, that reminds me of probably the most conflictual situation I ever found myself in. Got a call from the chair of deacons wanting to meet. And so I looked at my calendar and I set the meeting. And by the time that I arrived for the meeting, he was already sitting in the pastor's office, mad as a hornet. And I had no idea what that was. The issue that he had was, we could have resolved it in 2 minutes on a phone call, but he set up a meeting to come to the office with me. And the fact that I put it off for 2 days, he was livid. So he had been a manager for years at Sears and was a pretty authoritarian leader. When he spoke, people jumped. And so I knew a little bit of his background relative to that. And I knew enough systems work that this didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with some unmet need inside of him. And so I gave him a couple of days to calm down, and I called him and I went and sat down in his living room and had a very peaceful conversation. By the time I got there, he was a totally different person. He just needed to be affirmed in his role as a leader in the congregational system and not feel like I was putting him off. But I learned an incredibly valuable lesson from that experience. It let me know that my systems work really was valuable, because recognizing that was not about me, that there was truly something going on inside of him was extremely helpful. It also caused me that each time a person would ask for a meeting, how urgent is this? Yeah. How soon do you need to meet? So I did not step into that trap again with him or with anyone else. We went on to become really close friends, and so we were able to work through that situation. But he had an unmet need. And there was actually nothing in the system that was going to meet that need other than the system calling out his leadership in one way or another.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that happens a lot. And many times that unmet need is coupled with that person's, maybe at least at that moment, that person's inability to self-soothe, to self-regulate. We've all been there, right? I've kind of blown up at the moment, but hopefully, given a little bit of time, I'm able to calm down and to be able to access my prefrontal cortex, right? And to think about, oh, no, that's really the reason. And so as a pastor, for me to just jump when a member says, jump and say hi, how high, right? At that very moment, might actually unintentionally continue to reinforce those kinds of behaviors that we don't really, it's not as healthy. Yeah. Anything else? Well, let me share with you one other small video. This is kind of in an alternate universe, very, very alternate. This is what the scenario with the spouse might look like and sound like.
The same scene can be played out differently, in which the spouse communicates with each other in a more compassionate way that acknowledges human needs. After a long day at home taking care of twin toddlers, spouse 1 greets spouse 2 with a question. "Welcome home. How was your day at work?" Spouse 2 responds, "I had a hard day. I made a mistake and my boss critiqued me in front of my team. I felt embarrassed and I'm so tired and I just want to veg a while on the couch." Spouse 1 replies, "I'm sorry to hear that you had a challenging day. Would you like to hear about my day?" "Sure," replies spouse 2. "Well, the twins threw up and I just finished cleaning their mess. Thankfully, they're taking a nap now. I'm too tired to cook dinner. Do you want to go out for a quick bite?" Spouse 2 responds, "Wow, you had a hard day too. Sounds like we both need a break. Unfortunately, I just don't have it in me to go back out in public tonight. Since the kids are napping and it's quiet now, would you be open to ordering food delivery so that you don't have to cook tonight? If that doesn't work for you, I'm willing to consider other options." Take time now to discuss this video presentation in your small group.
So I'm gonna say, like, that's hardly ever happened to me, right? To have that kind of awareness and to be able to connect with my spouse in that way. But I do aspire to that, and I'm kind of practicing like what that might look like. But for me, it's just kind of a reminder that I actually have other options in terms of how I communicate, which can really help me to navigate a situation where probably it's not really a conflict. It's just like we're two human beings who are tired at the end of a day.
Sounds like mindfulness to me, Michael.
Yeah. 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 It is. It's mindful in both, first and foremost, like mindful in terms of like where I am in my own body, in my feelings, and in my thinking. So that gives me a greater capacity to be mindful of this particular situation and where the other person might be. I never know exactly. I have to ask and perhaps clarify. I can guess, I can surmise. Is this how you're feeling right now? I'm imagining you might be needing this. Am I close? Yeah. So, any thoughts? Let me end with this final slide. It's a meditation from Philippians 4:19. "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory, of God's glory in Christ Jesus." As contingent, created beings, there are going to be times when I have needs that I can't meet, other people can't meet. I think it is an act of faith to think that God might be able to meet it, and God may meet those needs in ways that I do not expect, and maybe frankly I don't really welcome. But God's ways are not my ways, and it has been helpful to me to, at the very least, it gives me pause, and it invites me to look at the situation from a perspective, a very different perspective that's not so like me-centered, but much more kind of global and systemic. And that often helps me to reframe and to reassess and to see a situation in a different way. So, any questions?
Had a quiet group today.
That's okay. I threw out a lot of stuff.
Experience, Michael.
Yeah. And here, this is a request. It's not a demand, so you don't have to do this. But I wonder if there is one kind of aha insight or a new perspective, or maybe a new practice or action that you want to take away from this, from our time together.
One of the last couple of slides was the one where you put up the, even though this need is there and it's legitimate, it might actually not be my responsibility. Or if it's my need, it might not actually be that other person's responsibility. They can be compassionate, but it may not be their role to fill it. Was a good reminder.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. I need to be reminded that every day.
To add to Kenny's insight, the self-awareness learning curve for me has always been to know when I need to take it personal, when I do not need to take it personal. And in our roles as pastors, we end up, I think, it's not about me. When someone is really upset about something at church, it's not about me. I just happen to be the pastor, and we're the most obvious recipient of the anxiety.
Yeah.
It goes with the job, but figuring out when it's not my responsibility, I don't take it personally. It's easy for me to automatically not take it personally, and I may need to step back and take a breath and realize I could have said something in a different way or responded a different way, and be attentive to that. And I think that falls into the whole conflict somewhere in the background of the conflict inventory work, being aware of when I don't need to take it personal, when I do. Does that make any sense at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I was really resonating with you when you were sharing that. Yeah. It was a struggle, and actually continues to be, having some clarity regarding, what is my responsibility in this situation? We'll actually talk about that in next week's seminar too, under the rubric of boundaries. Yeah.
Well, pastors are in such unique situations in that much of the time you are in a position where you are the one who's responsible, because you hopefully have a different set of lenses and you're looking at the system differently, and you're nudging the system to make necessary changes and to be transformed. And most people don't appreciate that on a regular basis. So in that sense, it's your responsibility, but it's your kingdom responsibility to actually be doing that kind of thing that causes sometimes the dis-ease on that side of the equation.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, Terry, I mean, I think about to what extent is it my responsibility to always be the one like soothing another person in their dis-ease, or to allow the person to work through their own dis-ease, walk alongside them, but at the end of the day, kind of recognizing maybe this is the work that they have to do, and that I can't do it for them. And so whatever conflict that might come out of that, right, is not something to avoid, but it is actually perhaps a natural consequence and progression toward healing and wholeness. Oh, Terry, you're I think muted.
Suzanne Stabile's one of her favorite things to ask is, what is mine to do? And that is such a good self-observing question to be asking all the time, especially when it comes to conflict.
Yeah, thanks. Exactly. Yep. It's 11:23 and I am at the end of my presentation. And so I always share my screen with a request for any feedback that you may have. And you can just use your smartphone or wherever to scan that QR code. I can, and I'm just open because I'm learning in terms of doing all of this too, right? How might I be able to do and present better? What other topics regarding surrounding conflict would you want to learn more about? And that can get me to hit the books and reflect and do all of those good things as I continue kind of my own calling and work. But so that's a request on my part. But at the end of the day, I'm just so really glad that you have been part of our time together, and thank you so much for your participation.
Michael?
Yeah.
Would you be able to cut and paste that into the chat?
Yeah. Yes. I hope I can. Let me see.
If it's going to come on an email afterwards, the QR thing is just not my best option right now.
No problem.
But I can't click your shared screen. So.
Right. Of course. Yes. I will. I think I have all of your email addresses, so I will share that link in the email once Mark uploads the video here. Okay.
Thank you, Michael.